that this translation issue, this word that was missed in all translations, is interesting because in a way it shows it's not a mistake. Of course, these are all the excellent translators. It's more of a lapsus. It's something that it's the inability to see where Levi's irony was anchored and to redraw the landscape to what would be normal, which is to have a silver martin and not a silver Martian. Perhaps you want to tell us a little bit about Patricia.
Yes. Can I say one other thing before speaking about Patricia? Because, he says it very well here, this question of why he writes a natural history. But, I think there is, in the flap jacket of the first edition of Natural History, he explains something about their history that I find very interesting, right? Because he writes the following. He says, I wrote about 20 stories and I do not know if I will write more of them, okay? And I wrote them on the ground of a perception of a tear in the fabric of the world in which we live. A large or small crack and vizio di forma. Vizio di forma has been translated here by flaw of form, okay? And this is a decision of the translation that I respect, even though in Italian, vizio di forma, literally means inherent vice, okay? An inherent vice is a particular, juridical term that has a very specific connotation, It's when a procedural error or there is a circumstantial irregularity that, somehow on the ground of which a certain document cannot be accepted, basically, in court, okay? So he speaks about vizio di forma, inherent vice, that towards this or that aspect of our civilization and our universe. I entered the world of writing with 2 books on concentration camps. It is not up to me to judge their worth, but they were undoubtedly serious, aimed at a serious readership. I was offering my audience now a volume of joke narratives, a moral trap that perhaps is entertaining. These questions, moral questions that I'm asking to myself. Well, I would not publish them if I had not noticed, not immediately to tell you the truth, that there existed a continuity, a bridge between the lager and these creations. The lager was the greatest of all vices. So I'm just saying because I wanted you to hear, emphasize how he sees these natural histories. Okay? And it's an introduction just of a remark I can make regarding Patricia. 2 minutes, in 2 minutes. Well, I'm just going to share with you something that I found in reading this text, okay? It is a very small thing, but is, has a big repercussion. Patricia too is basically of a particular species, insofar that she's been hibernated for 150 years, so she is a particular other in this context, right? There is a point when Baldur, that is in love with her and approaches her, asks her, So tell me, how is it our world seen from your eyes, right? The eyes of someone who, is awakened once a year and sees this world in this intermittent manner. And she says, reply, there is nothing extraordinary about it. You get used to it immediately. When I first read it, this word struck me as familiar. And I started to think, where is this coming from? And then finally I refound it. It's coming, in fact, from The Drawn and the Saved, from the chapter, which is a very, very, very important chapter, one of the most important chapters written in The Drawn and the Saved by Levi, on the gray zone. So addressing the very, very difficult questions of the Sonderkommandos, we know what they are. They are those special quads of prisoner, and for the majority of them Jewish, who were entrusted with running the crematorium and putting the prisoner to death and sorting the corpses. Levi quotes the statement of one of these few survivors of this task. And this man says, and there's a quote, doing this work, you either go crazy the first day, or you get used to it. Or you get used to it, right? So there's very specific echoes, right?
Is it abituati?
Yes, o ci si abitua subito, ci si abitua o diventi matto il primo giorno o ti abitui subito, right? So, you can see the literal relation between those two passages that, of course, ties very strongly, one context to the other, even if we are dealing with radically different environments, right? And so it brings about the questions, which is very serious, of, we can say, of what kind of a zone Patricia belongs to. And indeed, I do believe that she, in Levi's mind, belongs to the gray zone. The gray zone being, this zone of compromise and collaboration. Because I have to say one thing, that yes, it's true that Patricia, has been hibernated, but, by the scientist. But it is very clear in the play that, in fact, she participated to a competition for the choice of the person who were going to be, selected. Actually, the word is not selected, it's choose. Even though, and I made a point in my, reading, that the word is selected, but has been avoided on purpose by Primo Levi, and therefore it resonates underneath the text, because obviously the word selection is the word of the camps, But in any case, she was chosen.
He didn't use the word selection?
No,
he used the word chose.
Yes, it didn't. But it didn't,
But
to
you're
provoke.
saying you think the word is hiding?
Yes, for sure. I try to make an argument in this in my writing, but So in any case, the question, and I just wanted to conclude on this, it is, what is the great, because, Patricia could be, as I say, a girl like any one of the girls we see here in New York around that, embraces the ideal of the eternal beauty, right? And offering herself for, the experimentation of science, right? So the zone, the gray zone is a zone, this particular zone, that is a zone of compromise and collaboration. Is, according to Primo Levi, the bridge that is connecting the oppressors with the oppressed, right? Which brings about precisely, the as I was saying before, the question of subjective responsibility, to what degree a human being, it's embracing a certain, ideology, right? Including the ideology of beauty, the ideology of idealization, of science, etc. Of course, we cannot not think of the eugenic implication of all of this, just to say the word, right? And become accomplice of a system, right? Patricia is a accomplice who, at a certain point, decides to break with the system. And Primo Levi gives her a way out.
Thank you, Paola. I think
Well, I'll read you the part where she explains her way out. So Baldur, the young man who has fallen in love with her, takes his fiancée home and returns. So we hear footsteps, windows, footsteps on the gravel, a car door. Baldur turns on the engine. We're out, Patricia, he says, out of the ice, out of the nightmare. I feel like I'm dreaming for 2 hours. I've been living in a dream. I'm afraid I'll wake up. Patricia says coolly, did you take your girlfriend home? And Baldur says, who, Ilsa? Yes, I took her home. I broke up with her. And Patricia says, you broke up with her? Definitively? And Baldur says, it wasn't as hard as I was afraid it would be. Just a little scene. She didn't even cry. And there's a pause and you hear the engine running. And Patricia says, young man, don't judge me too harshly. I suppose the moment has arrived for an explanation. You must try to understand. I had to find a way to get out of here. And Baldur says, so that's all this was? A way of getting out? She says, yes, that's all it is. A way of getting out of the fridge and out of the Turl's house. Baldur, I owe you a confession. Baldur says, a confession is the least of it. Patricia says, I can't give you anything else, and it's not even a very nice confession. I'm truly tired. Frozen and unfrozen, frozen and unfrozen over a long period of time. It's really exhausting, she says. And then there's this, what the note I meant about something like out of Gogol. And then there's something else, she says. Baldur says something else, and Patricia says yes. Something else, his nighttime visits. Now this is her host, Peter?
Yes,
Yeah. Peter, yes, something else. She says his nighttime visits at 33 degrees, barely tepid, and I couldn't defend myself in any way. And I had to stay quiet, I couldn't speak. And perhaps he thought, and Baldur says, oh my dear, my poor thing, how you must have suffered. She says, yes, a real bother, you have no idea, an indescribable bore. And Lotte, how close are we to? All right, Lotte says that Lotte, Peter's wife, the one who opened the play, the hostess, the car drives away, and Lotte says, and that's how the story ends. I had suspected something might happen, and that night I heard strange noises, but I stayed quiet. Why should I have raised the alarm? It seems to me that it's better this way for everyone. Baldur, poor thing, told me the whole business. It seems that Patricia, on top of everything else, also asked him for money to go who knows where, to find a friend who lives in America, naturally he too in a refrigerator. As for Baldur, whether or not he got back together with Ilsa, no one cared very much one way or the other, not even Ilsa. We sold the fridge. As for Peter, we'll see. So I think what has happened here is that Paola has given you one side or one view of the story, and I have given you the other. But we're both actually talking about the same thing. which is an extremely grave moral circumstance, which is nevertheless treated with considerable irony. One of the reasons survival, what we call in America survival in Auschwitz, séquestre et mort, is so famous and so beloved, is that it does exactly that. That it takes a much more extreme circumstance than a vacuous young lady in a refrigerator. It takes a very extreme circumstance, but nevertheless treats it with a certain amount of wit and a certain freedom,
Lack of rhetoric.
a lack of rhetoric and a lack of tendentiousness, which makes it very different from other concentration camp memoirs that we have, and I'm thinking especially of Elie Wiesel. I think, you know, a lot of people's feelings about Levi have to do with that very fact, and it's not for nothing that Elie Wiesel won a Nobel Prize and Primo Levi did not. A lot of people like their morality warm on a plate. So that's really all I have to say. I love this thing for the tension between the moral situation and the delicatesse of the art, and Levi's sort of winking knowledge of human weakness.
Thank you very much, Joan Acocella and Paola Mieli. We have a few minutes for some questions from the public, and please.
The film we didn't see, is that, it's a film of the play?
Yes, it's a film. It's not precisely, doesn't follow precisely the script, but it's very, very close. They changed the names.
Was it ever produced in theater?
No, it was produced for the Italian television. 3 of the natural stories were produced in collaboration with Levi. Levi worked with a team and a director from the Italian television.
Do you have it in your archive?
Yes.
You can see it online, in your online archive?
Not online,
Okay, but in the
but you can
app,
come and then we'll show it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I have a question and a comment. The question is there a good translation? I mean, here you have the...
No, this is
complete
a wonderful translation,
Yes.
but that's not an error of translation. As I said, I think it's a lapsus.
But between Martian and Martin,
But it's a lapsus, it's not an error.
I mean, that many translators...
It is that somehow all translators were drawn to avoid the idea that the Martian had been killed and made into a fur.
Yes, I understand, but in English, there's a different spelling. You've got an A, Martian is M-A-R-T-I.
Well, in Italian too, is martora.
How did they do that?
There is a major difference.
You know, the human nature is not simple.
I know, I'm a psychoanalyst myself, but the idea that so many people would make the same mistake is baffling.
It is interesting. I
Each
find
person would make a different mistake. You wouldn't expect the same laugh out of a bunch of translators.
because we have in Italian you have the martora d'argento, which is a famous type of fur, is a fashionable type of fur, and I think that for someone who is not an Italian speaker, that would, you know, the argento somehow draws the attention, and you lose the martora in the marziano, and you end up with a martin.
You know, it's really two translators who made the mistake. It's the second time it's translated, and the new translator made the mistake of the previous one. because she was probably influenced by the previous.
So is it get mistranslated in other languages besides English? I mean,
No, I tried to check this out, but I couldn't find
Actually, this one is not translated in many languages, so it's, the collection of stories I think that this is the first translation in a foreign language in which it was published in the same order and with the same stories as the Italian versions. Previously, had been like few stories had been assembled from different collections and published.
But is there, for example, a French translation?
Yes.
Not of the natural history altogether.
Not to the.
But Studio is the French. And did you check it?
The Martian?
Did you check it?
Yes, no, Martian.
The French got the Martian.
Excuse me, sorry. Go ahead. No, I just want to point out that there is a major difference between making a mistake with Vizio di Forma, which you may not understand, because it's a very technical term, and Marziano Argentato, which is very clear. In other words, I mean, it's not a question, you keep saying it's a lapsus. It may be a lapsus, but there's a very thin line between the lapsus and the willful mistake.
Okay, you can call it, I think the lapses and the willful mistakes are very
But
close.
Yeah.
I think Paola, I'm sorry, she's your wife, right? But so you must understand. But the thing is, I don't think Paola is saying that it was a willful mistake. I think, or at least also as I understand Natalia, they're saying that it was there was an unconscious drag away from. Explain. Do I understand you correctly? That they couldn't bear it. You know.
It seems to me that is a misunderstanding in the reading of Levi's work. This is I don't want to give a qualification because I don't think that is appropriate to speak psychoanalytically on any kind of text. I'm totally against any kind of
But you
wide.
just did.
No. Why do you say this? No, I didn't speak psychoanalysis. I'm speaking. I'm a literal reader. I'm basically reading the text. The text says it is a silver Martian, right? And the translator doesn't look at Martian, and actually, there is in Italian, there is a major difference between Marziano and Martura. They are two radically different words. They don't have nothing except starting both like with the MA. So I'm just saying that it's obviously a misunderstanding in the reading of the spirit of Primo Levi. And this is my reading of this. I think that as this
We'll
gentleman,
have to ask the translators, and I've been trying to get some answers.
there is I'm returning to what Primo Levi says, that the reader, should be a willing reader, not a lazy reader. If you read this, as this gentleman, Tim Parks, a novelist, very famous, who wrote millions of books, etc., and claims to be, a specialist of Italian literature, and he translated lots of Italians, right? Compreso Calvino, Calasso, and all of this kind of thing. And you read what he writes, read the review. It's just unbelievable. Because obviously he didn't read Primo Levi, right?
We have a question here.
It's reading some other text that I don't know what is this text that is reading.
Yeah, it's just a very factual question. Can either or both of you talk a little more about how the narrative gets told in dramatic terms as a work for the stage? Is there a narrator figure, or do some of the characters do a lot of third-person exposition? Like, how many characters are there?
Yes,
Yeah.
I can do that.
Yeah.
In the play, it's a very small dramatist persona. Lotte and Peter, who are the hosts for the party, attending the defrosting. There are the guests, Maria and Robert.
Okay.
There are then are poor Baldur and his fiancée Insa. who I think Ilsa is, or Baldur is the child of the Lutzers. Then there's Patricia, and then there's some poor servant, Margareta, who sticks her face in the door once. And that's, I beg your pardon, it's the dog. Thank you. And so the play is introduced by Lotte, who introduces it and says, and so another year has passed.
Right.
Once again, it's December 19th. We're waiting for our guests to arrive for the same old party. I don't particularly like guests. My husband even used to call me the great bad. So she addresses us. It's very, I think it's a little Brechtian. I don't know why Brecht, you do.
Well, at least conventionalized, direct address to the audience.
Yeah. But yes, it's very conventionalized, and then the play transpires with the audience not being addressed again, and then after Patricia has disabused poor Baldur, Lotte comes back in, and I read you that part.
Right.
Lotte says, well, that's what happened.
Got it.
So,
framing device.
that's right.
Yeah.
So which makes it, I would suggest that the artificiality of this makes it more ironic.
Right. Sure.
This is Roger Copeland, a professor of theater history at Oberlin.
Welcome.
I think this is the last one that we'll have time for, so.
Okay.
I don't know if I should reopen this, but I think a simple explanation of the repetition of the mistake is that the subsequent translators looked at it.
Yeah.
They were mystified by the Martian thing, and they took the authority of the previous translator.
It's a possibility. I mean, it's there is also the fact that in Latin, Martora comes from Martes. That is the same.
From Mars, from the name of Mars.
Yes.
The planet or the god or both?
The god. So it's Martes, and it's possible that the translator went into some research on Latin etymology, because Primo Levi uses it a lot. So, we're open to possibilities. When we can speak with the translators, we'll have the answer.
Did different translators use that so they copied each other? That's one other.
No, but these translators, this is a completely new translation, so and it's different in many ways. So it's.
Could I ask something to get away from that?
Yes.
To stop beating that horse. I was struck, Joan, in the last piece we read when Patricia is describing her abuse, her assault.
Yes.
So comically, but she makes a point of saying, "I could not speak. I could not speak."
She couldn't protest. Yes.
And I was struck, Paola, at the end of your essay, and I wonder if we could maybe finish on this. You recount Levi's recurring dream of the camps, and he, I guess, contacted other survivors who also had the same dream. Could you explicate that?
Yes. Is the most serious and somber aspect of all this. Yes, that is that Primo Levi explained very clearly how of all the possible horrors of the camps, the most cruel was the possibility of speaking, and that people were dying for the impossibility of speaking, right? I can, give you a little quote here that I have, because I prefer always letting, say things. It says, speech is the necessary and sufficient mechanism that makes man a man, right? And it also says, all human races speak, no non-human species know how to speak, right? And the impossibility of speech was a characteristic of one major thing that was stripped away within the camps. And I think that they're expanding on the question of the particular, of the manner in which the particularity of this horrible situation of the camp is specifically in attacking the very core of what is universal in human being, that is speech, right? And this question emerges also in this play, because the violence that Patricia, submitted to occurs when she cannot speak, right? Because she's frozen, right? So it's definitely a reference to this. And of course, many more, I expand on this question of speech because I think that one of the point that Levi develops so well in the different facets of these tales that are collected in natural histories is precisely the relation, the constant attack to speech. For instance, by the versifier, that is to this machine that challenges the poet, basically that substitutes the poet, right? Or by, for instance, the fact that all of a sudden animals are, developing, messages, written messages on the cells of their bodies, in order to communicate to humans, right? And this entire question of speech, which is obviously at the core of the problem of contemporary science, because the problem of contemporary science, especially neurology, especially psychiatry, especially certain research in medicines, it goes in the direction of, somehow identify the matter and eliminating in the consideration of the human being the function of speech as what is in fact making the human body human, right? All the entire course of neurology goes in the direction of eliminating speech from humans, and this is definitely something that from different facets of his approach to science, Primo Levi understood deeply.
But the dream. Can you say the dream?
Sorry, I didn't speak about the dream. Yes, because it is one of the tales that he mentions in Sequestro Nomo is the fact that the prisoners in the camp were sharing the same dream, in the sense that each of them was dreaming, of in different instances, in different manner, but of all of a sudden to be back home, and finally be able to tell the horror they were submitted to. And the dream was, this possibility of explaining, this is happening to me. But each single time, the dream turned into nightmare, insofar as the family members, the friends, the most intimate people, they wouldn't listen. They would basically turn away. They would just go away. And, each prisoner would waking up, in the horror of not being listened to, including by the closest people, to wake up to the horror of the camp. And I made this remark, as the only analytical thing, because my reading is not analytical at all. It's the only psychoanalytical reference I made is on.
Didn't you say that people that were a translator, it was too hard for them to then I misunderstood you.
I don't know. But in any
there
case,
was a motivation.
Lacan says something that is very interesting there. That that the characteristic of a nightmare is that we wake up from something that is real, that we cannot stand with, to be thrown into, a worst real, But which one is the worst? Is for the, closer people we have not to be able to listen to the horror that we experience, or the horror of the camp itself, you know. So this is the question of speech, you know. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.